Again, another pleasure for us to meet again. Today we are going to talk about interest, and remember we are in economics class. So the summary of today's lesson is we shall discuss the meaning of interest rate. We shall see what an interest is, and we shall see why interest is paid. We shall discuss determinants of interest, and we shall look at types of interest, and we shall have some calculations on some types of interest. Okay, so let's begin our lesson by seeing the difference between interest rate and an interest. So first of all, from our senior four, we looked at factors of production and their rewards, and we saw that the reward for capital when it participates in the production of goods and services is called an interest. Therefore, interest reward for use of capital in production process, and interest rate refers to the price at which money is lent out or borrowed. So we know that when you borrow money from a financial institution, the charge that you are supposed to pay when you use that money, we call it an interest, or in other words, an interest is the cost of borrowing. So now let's understand why interest is paid, or why do financial institutions charge interest. First of all, interest is a reward for saving. That is to say, interest is paid to reward those who postpone their consumption to the future. So we all know that when you save money, you forego consumption. So when you forego your consumption by saving money in your savings account or another type of account in the bank, you have to be rewarded. So interest is a reward for people who do save. In other words, they would have used their money for other purposes other than saving. So when they save, financial institutions reward them by giving them an interest. Next, it is paid to reverse the positive time preference of individuals. That is to say, it is paid to encourage individuals to save. So we know that time preference for money is either when you use your money in the present or in the future. So for individuals to have to reverse their need to use money in the present, the financial institutions attract them by paying them an interest when they save their money with financial institutions. So in that case, interest is used to reverse that interest, to reverse people's desire to spend money other than saving it in the present time. We also have that it is charged for management. That is, it is paid to meet the expenses of the lending institutions, for example, files, stationery, manpower, etc. So these financial institutions, they hire workers and they incur expenses in the process of lending money. For instance, they buy pens and some other stationery that they use when they are preparing people's loans. So people who borrow money from those financial institutions, they have to pay in order for institutions to cover those expenses that they incur in the process. Another one is that it is paid for use of loanable funds. So loanable funds is the money available in financial institutions to be lent out to the public. So when you use that money, you have to be charged. Why? Because you may borrow money and you fail to pay it back. So you have to be charged an interest as a compensation for the risk taken by the financial institution to lend you money. So it is a charge for inconveniences to cover the opportunity cost of lending. So we all know that we know what the opportunity cost is at this level. So the use of money has opportunity cost. For instance, if you choose to lend money, or if a financial institution chooses to lend money to an individual, that money would even be used maybe to build a certain commercial building in town where the financial institution can generate income. So when it lends it out, then it will be foregoing other things that it would invest in the money. So in that case, it charges an interest as a compensation for the opportunity cost foregone when they lend it out. And interest is also charged for risk taking. For example, we can say that that money may be lost. For instance, if they lend it out to someone and that person maybe business collapses, or someone dies, or any other problem may happen that may not enable the person to pay back the bank money. Let us continue our discussion by looking at the determinants of interest rate. The first one we can talk about is the level of demand for loanable funds. So we have said that loanable funds, that is money available in financial institutions for lending out to the public. So if demand for loanable fund is high, then the interest rate will be high. And if the demand for loanable funds from financial institutions by the public is low, then the interest rate will be low. So that one is when we have the perfect market condition where the interest rate in the market is determined by the market forces of demand and supply for money or for loanable funds. And number two, we have the level of liquidity preference. So we said the liquidity preference is the desire by individuals to hold their wealth in form of cash other than investing it in financial assets or other properties. So if the liquidity preference by individuals is high, then the interest rate will be also high. And when the liquidity preference is low, the interest rate will also be low. This is because when liquidity preference is high, financial institutions will not have enough loanable funds, since people will have kept their money in their pockets or in their homes. And then the other side, if liquidity preference is low, it means that people will have to increase saving or have more money in financial institutions, which increase supply of money for lending by financial institutions, and then that makes interest to lower automatically. So our next point of discussion is the period taken to repay the loan. So the longer the period, the higher the interest rate, and the shorter the period, the lower the interest rate. So someone who is going to borrow money, like say for 5 years, will be charged a higher interest rate than someone who is borrowing money for 6 months. So this is because someone who is borrowing for a long time, there is a high risk of losing the money, and then someone who is borrowing for a short period of time is likely to pay back easily. And our next idea is the level of money supply. We know that money supply is the amount of money circulating in the hands of the public and the money on demand deposits. So if there is increased money supply, then interest rates will reduce, and the decrease in the money supply increases interest rates. So our next point of view is the level of inflation in the country. We know that inflation is the persistent increase in the general price levels for goods and services in the country. So when the inflation is high, then the interest rate is also high, and when the rate of inflation is low, then the interest rate will also be low. So this is because when financial institutions lend out money and they expect the inflation to be low, then they will not charge high interest, because when people pay back the money, it will be having the same value as at when they received it. However, if financial institutions anticipate that inflation is going to increase by say 2% in the near future, when they are lending out money, they have to calculate the rate of interest at which the money is going to lose value, and then they add it to the exchange rate at which, rather at the interest rate at which they are going to lend the money, so that when borrowers pay back the money, they don't pay it back when it has lost value. So we shall have an explanation of the difference between nominal rate, and then we shall also look at what you call real rate in the few slides to come. So we can talk also about the amount of money borrowed. So the higher the amount, the higher the interest rate, and the lower the amount, the lower the interest rate. So people who are borrowing much money, they may be charged a higher interest rate, and those ones borrowing less money, they may be they may be charged a low interest rate depending on the risk for that money. Then you have risks involved in lending. So we have a situation where the risk of lending that money may be high. So in that case, the interest rate will also be high depending on the economic activity that people are going to invest in. While if the risk of borrowing or lending money is low, the interest rate will be low. So maybe you can take an example of a farmer and a trader. So you find that maybe traders may be able to access loans at low interest rates than farmers, because trading is less risky compared to agriculture. So the risk involved in lending determines the interest rate. And our next idea is the competition among financial institutions. So if there is competition among financial institutions, then there will be a lower interest rate. And then on the other hand, if the competition in the money market is low, then interest rates tend to be high. Let us see the types of interest. So we are going to talk about 4 main types of interest, and these are, we have what we call simple interest, we have compound interest, we have real interest, and we have nominal interest. Let us have an in-depth understanding of the concept of interest. So we are going to begin by looking at the first type, which is the simple interest. So simple interest is defined as the interest paid basing on a constant principal amount borrowed. So this means that the amount of interest paid is the same throughout the repayment period. So if money is lent out or borrowed, the rate of interest borrowed is constant or is the same for the whole period for repaying back that amount of money or loan. So this is calculated basing on the principal amount or the portion of the principal amount which remains unpaid. So our formula for calculating simple interest is P times R times T all over 100, where P is the principal amount borrowed, and you have R, the rate of interest, and T is the duration of payment. All right, let's have the first example. So we are going to assume that you deposit Rwandan francs 1,000 into a bank account which pays 7% simple interest per year. Then you leave the money in the bank for 3 years. Then you have to find the interest that you earn on that amount at the end of the 3 years. So after the 3 years, the interest that you will be earned will be 210. So, and the total amount that will be on your account will be 1,210. So let's see how we come up with this. So our first step, we're going to find an interest rate by using the formula I or interest is equal to P times I times T, and then we define the P as the principal amount, and then this I is our rate of interest, and T is the duration. So in this case, our principal is 1,100 francs, and I is our rate of interest, which is 7%, and T is the duration, which is 3 years. So let's see how we come up with this. So we shall take our 1,100 francs times 70%, which is 0.07, times T, which is 3. So our answer will be equal to 210 Rwandan francs. And then for step 2, to find the amount, we use the formula. We get our principal, which is P, plus our interest rate. So we shall have our principal as 1,000 plus our interest, which is 210. So our final answer will be 1,210 Rwandan francs. So that will be our total amount. Okay, let's go to example 2. We assume that you deposit Rwandan francs 1,000 into a bank account that pays 1.5% simple interest per month. Then you leave the money for 210 days. Then you find the interest earned and the amount at the end of those 210 days. So we have to convert the interest rate of 1.5 per month into the rate per year. So we shall take the rate per month times 12, which will be equal to 1.5% times 12, which will give us 18%. So our step 2, we have to convert the 210 days into years. So we shall take our 210 days will be equal to 210 divided through by the total number of days in a year, which is 365. So this one will give us 0.57534 years. So we shall move on to our number 3, step 3, finding an interest rate by using our formula. So our formula is given by this expression, as you have seen above, where I is the interest, P is the total principal, our I is the rate of interest per year, and T is the total time in years. So in this example, we have P as 1,100 francs, I we got 18%, and our T is given by 0.57534 years. So our simple interest will be equal to, we multiply 1,000 times the rate which is 0.18, and we multiply it by 0.57534, and then our resultant answer is equal to 103.561. So now to find the amount by using the formula, we said you get the principal plus the interest. So when we add the principal plus our interest, we shall have our total amount as 1103.561. Okay, so we are going to move on to now compound interest. So compound interest arises when interest is added to the principal, so that from that moment on, the interest that has been added also itself earns interest. So this addition of interest to the principal is, we call it compounding. So like we saw in the first example, the interest which was earned is now again added to the principal, and in the next period that interest also is given, or it also earns an interest together with the previous principal. So we are going to see how we calculate for compound interest. Okay, so the total amount payable using compound interest is calculated using the formula which is A T, or being equal to P into 1 plus R power T, and our interest is calculated by using our formula AT being equal to P into 1 plus R power T minus P naught, and these figures are defined. A is total amount, P is the principal amount borrowed, R is the rate of interest, T is the duration of repayment or time in years, and our P naught is the original principal. Worked example. So we are going to see that Mbabazi borrowed 1,100,000 francs from Goshen Bank at a compound interest of 3% per year to be paid back in 3 years. So we are going to find the interest that Mbabazi will pay back after the 3 years. So first of all, we have to look at the amount paid after 3 years. So the total amount to be paid after 3 years, we shall get it by using our formula A being equal to P into 1 plus R power T. As we define them up, P is now 1 million, rate of interest is 3%. You said our principal is 1 million, or 3% is also 0.03 when we convert it into decimals, and our time is 3 years. So our total amount will be equal to 1 million multiplied by 1 plus 0.3% power 3. So this one will give us this expression here. So the final amount after 3 years will be equal to, so we have to multiply the 1 million by this bracket, which will give us 1,092,727 francs. However, to get our level of interest, we shall use our formula, this one. So we shall subtract the principal amount from the total amount. So this will give us our 1,092,707 minus the principal, which is 1 million, and our rate of interest will be 92,727 francs. So this is now your trial exercise. We are going to use this formula to find the answer for this question. It is that if you deposit 3,500 into an account paying 10% annual interest compounded monthly, how much money will be in the account after 8 years? So you can try out that question. So the formula has been defined. A is total amount, P is the principal amount of money deposited, R is the annual interest rate, N is the number of times compounded per year, and T is time in years. So now we're going to understand what nominal interest is and what real interest is. So these two concepts, we have to understand them clearly. First of all, let's see what nominal interest rate is, or what nominal interest is. So nominal interest or interest rate is the rate that someone earns or pays on a loan. This is the amount you see on a sign advertising interest rate. Like if you want to deposit money on your savings account, you go in the bank, they will tell you that when you deposit money on your savings account, you earn like 8% or 6%. So that's 6% or 8% that they will tell you. We call it nominal interest rate. So now, how is it different from the real interest rate? So we have seen what nominal is. So real interest rate, we get it is now the nominal interest rate subtract the rate of inflation in the economy at a given time. So we have that the nominal interest rate adjusted for inflation. This is the effective interest rate that one earns or pays. So we are going to have this example. For example, suppose Bank of Kigali wants to earn 15% when it lends money to borrowers. So if its target is to earn 15% interest, but Bank of Kigali thinks that there will be a 2% inflation in the economy. So if it doesn't calculate off the inflation into what it charges in interest, it will truly earn only 13%. So if the inflation rate is expected to be 15%, and rather if the interest rate is expected to be 2%, but Bank of Kigali wants to lend money to its customers, but its target is to earn 15% interest. So if it does not compute or calculate off the rate of inflation, and it lends out money at a rate of 15%, but when inflation is going to be 2%, in reality, Bank of Kigali will earn only 13% because the 2% will be lost as inflation. So what can now Bank of Kigali do if it wants to earn 15% when it lends out its money and it is expecting inflation to be 2%? So in this case, Bank of Kigali, when it calculates 2% inflation, it may now lend out its money at 17%, such that when the borrowers pay back the money at an inflation rate of 2%, okay, the 2% will be lost, but the target of 15% will be achieved by Bank of Kigali if it lends out money at a rate of 17%.